Wife wants to know how to build a swamp witch. Oh, you are the person for this. Like, I can help too, but
I wrote an article on how to play a witch using raw. I broke it out into 3 specific like types or classifications of witch. The first one is like the do good crystal witch, you know, like using natural elements for her craft. The second type was like a hag, which is like using spells and cauldrons and familiars. And then the third type was like an oracle, so like divining, fortune telling, etc.
swamp witch. Okay, so are we just talking a witch type character, not necessarily a hag, but like a spellcaster who uses eerie esoteric magic and dwells in the swamp? Then the first thing that comes to my mind is it'd be cool to do like a water genasi. I once made a druid who was a water genasi, and I liked the whole like swamp bog aspect. It was a druid of the land with the swamp. Like, I just really wanted to feed into that. And I used a lot of themes that had to do with frogs. So that's something that you could go with, is describing what frogs, and like use frog familiar, use frogs in your spells, you know, and different bog creatures like dragonflies and mosquitoes. Maybe you could also be a swarm keeper ranger and you use a swarm of mosquitoes.
The swamp is a natural cycle of decay. So I think that she should focus on her, I guess, personal credo could be like accepting death as this part that gives back to the swamp. So for instance, you said like frog familiars. This is kind of a really gross lore bit of our own history, but there's a thing in witchcraft where a witch, so there's like a component is like a frog bone, but it's not great to like necessarily strip the flesh off of a dead frog or kill a frog yourself. Like sometimes it's like depending on what kind of witch you are. But so what you do is you find a dead frog and you put it next to an anthill and you let the ants strip off all its flesh. And then you take those bones and you put them in a natural spring or well that's just sitting, so stagnant water. And over time, when one bone starts to float, that is your magical component for your spell casting. It's like a divination bone, or it could be your wand even. So I would say that she could focus heavily on the natural processes of decay to really hone her craft and give her her components, which might be hard in role playing with a campaign with your friends, and you know, like you don't always have time to dedicate to that. But I think that she could enjoy her own lore and then just kind of throw in stuff like that every now and then.
Yeah, and Mr. Welch, on our stream when we DM Roundtable, we talked about how to use hags in a campaign. And we kind of talked about the concept of hexbloods. Maybe your wife could play a hexblood character from Van Richard's Guide to Ravenloft. She has a lineage that has to do with hags, but maybe she never figured it out. She was placed in a family and then like grew
As
up
a
in like,
changeling.
yeah, and then she grew the horns, crown, and all that kind of stuff, and became more hag-like, and was cast out, and she had to escape as a pariah, you know, an outcast. Now she lives in a swamp all by herself, has no idea where she came from or what happened to the real her that the hag consumed or whatever to create her. You know, so there's a lot of different ways to go about it. Hopefully those sorts of ideas help you. She's looking at the ooze para-elemental genasi. Oh, that sounds super interesting.
James makes a really good point about the spore druid, especially with the whole theme of decay. I think that's a great base class that you can use for your swamp witch. One of our tiers, I released just like a one-page custom race build for a dryad. Yeah, I think that any kind of like nature-based race would be amazing for a swamp witch.
Oh, you know what would be cool is to take your dryad playable race and make it so you do the blighted druid from Tal'Dorei Reborn that we mentioned earlier. So maybe you are from just this grotesque swampy place, and then you have like little twiggy things that you summon up out of the waters, and when you do your spells and all that kind of stuff, and then you can so you hex blood, and you're like a blighted druid from a swampy place, that sort of thing. Maybe you started as a water genasi, but maybe you turned into a hex blood, so you like that, do that whole thing. There's a lot of ways you can go about it, but that's cool. Plasmoid, that's the name of it. Thank you. They grabbed it from Star Frontiers, the old TSR game. Yeah, I've been watching some lore videos about them. They're super interesting where those concepts come from.
What is the monster that's like a sea hag?
Sea hag.
Is it just sea hag?
Yeah, they're just sea hags.
I feel like you could take that and take the lore from that and just translate it over to swamp as
Oh
well.
yeah. So you'd be like a hexblood sea hag flavor. Swamp witch sounds terrifying. Yeah, it really does. Like, I mean, swamps are already terrifying as it is, all that stagnant water. I have a friend who was in the military, and during a training exercise, they were going through a bog area, and if they didn't stick to the area they were supposed to, it was really deadly. And they actually had someone in the military who like fell into a pit of snakes
Oh my
underwater.
gosh.
Like, yeah, gnarly stuff. Like just stay out of there, because a lot of the areas that it look like it's even ground, but really it's just like moss and grass on top of water, and you just step right into it, and you never know what you're getting into. Swamps are terrifying.
Yeah, so it sounds like water breathing would be necessary for a swamp witch, as well as like a speak with animals and focus on like the snakes and the spiders and the rats.
Lots of creepy crawlies. You might want to do a check that there's no one in the group who's just going to be perpetually creeped out, by by all this kind of stuff. Because I know some people, even just spiders, they don't want any spiders in their game. It just creeps them out and it makes them not enjoy the game. So always be careful with these creepy concepts.
Yeah.
Know your friends in your group.
The last bit of lore that I might suggest, and I don't know if this is touching on appropriation, so maybe just be cautious with it, but maybe looking at witchcraft from hoodoo cultures, still being respectful and not like misrepresenting them or anything like that.
Is hoodoo different from voodoo?
No,
Or...
so hoodoo is like an example would be like the New Orleans type of witchcraft. So
Oh, okay.
basically, yeah. So
I mean, New Orleans is very swampy, that area.
yeah, so lots of like dolls. You can create little poppets or have your swamp witch create poppets, obviously. Maybe that can be flavored for like the flavor of the spell command is she's got a poppet that she created in the likeness of whoever she's trying to command, and then that's what she does.
You know what else comes to mind is there was an NPC like Bullywog or something in Horde of the Dragon Queen who wore a hat, kind of like a pope, like it was big and then like 2 points to it. It was an alligator's head, so it was like the two jaws of the alligator made like the points of it, and I've always remembered that image.
Like a crown.
Yeah, so you could get an alligator's head for a crown. That would be super creepy.